US President Joe Biden has said that negotiators were near an agreement that would stop Israel's military operations in Gaza. He expected this to happen within the next week. The deal will basically allow the exchange or the release of at least some of the 100-plus hostages who are still held in captivity by Hamas.
Well, I hope by the beginning of the weekend. The end of the weekend. At least my national security advisor tells me that we're close. We're close. It's not done yet. And my hope is by next Monday, we'll have a ceasefire.
Speaking with reporters during a pit stop in New York, Biden offered the most hopeful assessment of the talks so far. His comments suggest that the war might be close to a major turning point. I hope by the end of the weekend. That is how Biden responded when he was asked by reporters when he expected a ceasefire to begin. He went on to add that his national security advisor has been telling him that we're close. We're not done yet, but we're close. And his hope is that by Monday, there will be a ceasefire. Now, the US president delivered the comments almost spontaneously in response to reporter questions during a visit to an ice cream shop after taping a segment on Seth Meyers' late-night comedy show. Now, this comes amid active talks in the region. Israel's war cabinet has approved what is going to be the broad terms of this deal. It basically will see a 6-week halt in return for the release of about 40 hostages. An Israeli delegation is expected to meet in Doha with intermediaries from the United States, Egypt, and Qatar. An agreement for a lengthy ceasefire is timed to start with the beginning of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, which starts early March. Israeli bombardment in Gaza, which has killed many thousands of Palestinians, has created a humanitarian crisis around the region. It could also provide an opening for a surge in humanitarian assistance which Gaza so desperately needs. There is basically no food, water, or electricity. All of it is in short supply there. The start of Ramadan, which falls around the 10th of March, is seen as an unofficial deadline for the ceasefire to kickstart. The month is a time of heightened religious observance and dawn to dusk fasting for hundreds of millions of Muslims around the world. Israeli-Palestinian tensions have flared up in the past during the holy month as well, most notably during the 1967 war when Israel pushed back major Arab powers like Egypt and Syria. A negotiated deal, if it happens, would be a dramatic and perhaps even a defining moment in this 5-month-long conflict. It could lead to the release of at least 40 of the remaining hostages who are in Hamas captivity. Remember, that attack happened on the 7th of October, in which at least 1,200 Israelis were killed. It could also eventually mean freedom for dozens of other hostages who are still in captivity. In fact, the families of many of these hostages have been waging a pressure campaign in Israel to demand the release of the hostages, even as Israel has been responding to the Hamas attacks with 5 months of intense ground and air operations. President Biden did not elaborate on the details of the ceasefire or whether or not Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel has signed off on the ceasefire. While he once again backed Israel's right to defend itself, he also called himself a Zionist. But President Biden pressed his argument that Israel needs to recalibrate its approach to minimize civilian casualties. Concerns have been mounting, particularly as Israel says it's going to begin operations in the southernmost city of Rafah very soon. Netanyahu, on the other hand, has said that Israeli forces would invade Rafah regardless of any ceasefire or hostage deal. According to him, it has to be done because total victory is Israel's goal, and total victory is within Israel's reach. But he also conceded that if a ceasefire were to be agreed to before the siege of Rafah, then that would mean that the operation in Rafah has to be delayed by a few weeks. But Israeli negotiators have signaled that Israel could release a group of high-profile Palestinian prisoners who are currently serving lengthy jail terms in exchange for the freedom of some of the Israeli hostages who are still held in Gaza. The change in Israeli negotiating strategy is significant because it could help persuade Hamas to release Israeli soldiers who were captured back in October. It could also agree to a deal that would temporarily pause the fighting in the Gaza Strip. But Hamas, in its most immediate comments to speculation about this ceasefire deal in response to what President Biden has said that so far they have not been approached with any concrete offer. In fact, one of the spokespersons for Hamas has said that much of this was being done in a speculative kind of fashion simply to pressure Hamas to soften the terms of the deal. International efforts to reach a truce had been stalled over Israel's refusal to release those Palestinians who were convicted of murder or other heinous crime in order to get a permanent ceasefire. These are the two measures: the release of convicts who are convicted of heinous crimes and the path to a permanent ceasefire. These are the two measures that Hamas has been holding out for. Now Israeli negotiators have privately agreed to what is an American proposal that would see at least 5 female Israeli soldiers released for 15 Palestinians convicted of major terrorism charges. The Israeli government had previously avoided such a concession, in part because the release of Palestinians convicted of major crimes would attract significant domestic criticism. The idea is part of a wider American proposal that would allow for the release of 40 out of the roughly 100+ hostages who are still in Hamas captivity. But the ball really is in Netanyahu's court. How long can he continue to hold out in the hope of a better deal, or simply run the risk of further alienating both the Islamic world and also his biggest ally, the United States, by disregarding sentiment during the holiest Muslim month of Ramadan? Ultimately, in this balancing act will hang not just the future of Gaza, but perhaps even the political survival of Benjamin Netanyahu.